Now, Sir Elton's collaboration with Charlie is just one of many on his new album, The Lockdown Sessions. He is 74, but is showing no sign of slowing down or losing a single ounce of his enthusiasm for working with other artists or discovering new music. And as Charlie Puth will testify, Elton's sense of humour isn't fading either. If anything, Sir Elton is getting more mischievous. Charlie, first question for you really is that, have you yet experienced Elton's mischievous sense of humour?
What do you mean? I have no idea what you speak of. I don't get 10 emails a day from Elton with interesting anecdotes and funny phrases. Yes, I'm well accustomed to it. I see it a lot.
He does have, Elton, you do have a very mischievous sense of humour, don't you?
I do, but I'm British, and British people tend to have a very mischievous sense of humour. And of course, I love torturing people with it, like Charlie.
I've grown a callus to it. I just know it's coming. Every text message, every FaceTime, I know exactly it's going to be.
I mean, when you get an Atlanta number coming up on your phone, Charlie, what was your first thought?
Well, I actually missed the first phone call from him because it was a couple of years ago, if you remember. It was I was on tour and I hadn't slept, and I saw 3 missed Atlanta phone calls, and the pit of my stomach, the stomach ache that I proceeded to have after having missed 3 calls from Elton John was it weighed heavy on me for the next couple of days. But then we spoke shortly after that. But now you don't use the Atlanta number. I use FaceTime.
I haven't been in Atlanta for a long time because of COVID. That's why. But I was in Atlanta when I was doing my radio show there, and of course I tried to get him to do the interview, and of course he fell asleep after celebrating the end of his tour. But being the nice person that I am, I forgave him, and he sent me a beautiful bunch of flowers, and it was nice. But I hadn't met him until 2 years ago, in a year and a half ago in 2020.
Mm-hmm. Elton, what have been the most extreme reactions that you've had to calling up artists out of the blue? Because I can imagine there must be occasions where someone's going, Steve, it's not funny. Stop winding me up. You're not Elton John. Because you do this. I mean, Sam Fender. There's a list of artists as long as my arm where you've done this to over the years. It's
particularly embarrassing when you have the wrong phone number. And then it's happened to me once. And I started this tirade. Hello, you all. How are you? And you go, who is this? Just like, and then of course they can trace your number and then they call you back. Who is this? And I went, no, it's nobody. That's happened to me once. I'm very careful that I ring the phone right number. But that's the only time that it ever happened to me, but it wasn't a huge embarrassment.
What happened? There's presumably always a silence, isn't there? Or someone saying, excuse me?
Sorry?
Yeah. Yes, you must get that.
What was that?
It's Elton John. It's Elton John. You have to kind of... There must be a stunned silence, surely, when you call these people, new artists up. I know Charlie's not new as such, but there must be. I think
they're all used to me now. I can't really say what I say to people straight away on the phone because it's the national radio. But you can more or less... I think I've probably said it to you a few times. Good morning, you old... Yes, thank you.
How do the feelings in advance of this extraordinarily brilliant album, The Lockdown Sessions, feel in comparison to, almost 20 years ago exactly, to the kind of imminent release of songs from the West Coast? Is it comparable, the feelings?
Not really. I had no plans to make a record, Nihal, at all during lockdown. Lockdown happened all of a sudden. We were in Australia. We flew home after the last show. We flew to Los Angeles, rather. And then COVID started to hit and lockdown began to start. And I was in a restaurant and I met Charlie for the first time. He happened to live very near me, 4 doors away from me in Los Angeles. And he said, listen, I've got a studio if you feel like ever writing. And I said, I really have been a fan of Charlie's for a long time. So I went up there with no expectations. And I sat down at his electric piano and wrote a melody straight away, which is, again, very unusual because I write to lyrics. And then he finished it off, and then we had a song, and it was like, so he kind of kicked the whole thing off. I really had no intention of doing anything. I basically became the session musician that I was 54 years ago. I was doing the Little Nas S track and the Glenn Campbell track at Abbey Road Studios, Studio 2, and I thought 54 years ago, I was in this studio playing on He Ain't Heavy, He's My Brother by the Hollies. And here I am, being a piano player and a vocalist again, and it was just felt so good. So it was, everything that happened was a pleasant surprise, but it was Charlie that kick-started it all. I'm very grateful to him for that, because I had such a blast playing with all these people.
You mentioned Glenn Campbell there. Those lyrics of I'm Not Going to Miss You seem incredibly poignant as he sings them.
It's the last song he ever wrote, and it came out 10 years ago, and it's a song about saying goodbye to his family and his wife, and about his condition of Alzheimer's. And when it came out originally, I commented on it publicly and said how a beautiful song it was. And his family contacted me and said, thank you for doing that. And so when they had this idea of redoing the album with different artists doing duets with him, they asked me to do that track. And I'm so grateful, because it is such a beautiful song. It's succinct, very short, but it sums up the condition so well. And, you know, I've been a Glenn Campbell fan for years and years, not only as a vocalist, but as a guitarist, and as a person, and what he did with, you know, how he dealt with his Alzheimer's. And so for me, it was an honor to sing on that song. And it was probably the hardest track of all the tracks on the album to do, because I had to get the vocals sound right. I had to get it as empathetic as he was. And so that was the biggest challenge of any track on the album that I did.
Charlie, what is it like working with the world's most famous session musician?
That's a good way to put it. It's unbelievable, and even how we made After All. He wasn't exaggerating. He sat down at that electric piano, and it seemed to, kind of like the lyric in the song, just fall out of the sky musically. None of us were expecting anything to happen out of that day, and he sits down and says, verbatim, "What about something like this?" And you hear it in the beginning. That's his one and only take on the Rhodes. I didn't have to edit it at all. Usually I have to do a lot of surgical work when I'm perfecting things, but he played it perfect tempo. He didn't play it to a metronome. All I did was write the rest of the lyrics. The melodies were within the piano part, so they were all just there. It's just uncovering them, and then put the drums on, and then bam, we had a song. It's unbelievable working with the world's best session musician.
Elton, I don't think there's any artist in the world that could get Stevie Nicks and Young Thug on the same album. Bringing this group of extraordinary and diverse individuals together. I mean, how much pride do you have in these songs? And I guess which one lyrically is the most kind of personal it feels to you as you sing it?
I do love the Rina Sawayama one, because it's about, a gay family and gay people coming together. In fact, it closed the Olympic Games, it was the song they played at the closing ceremony of the Tokyo Olympic Games. But I also love Simple Things, which is a lyric by... I wrote the song in LA in Andrew Watt's studio, who produced the track, and Brandy Carlisle sings on it. But it was actually written by Andrew Watt's songwriting girl, who writes these lyrics. But her boyfriend is a poet, and it was a poem, and somehow it found its way into the pile of lyrics. And so I've written this song with a poet, and I love the song. And when I played it to Bono in the South of France, I said, that's such a beautiful lyric, because it's about life and what you should get out of life. And I think it's what we all went through when lockdown happened, and we all focused on the simple things. Well, I did with my kids and David, and you got to reevaluate what you really want out of life, and that's what this song means to me.
Other than After All, Charlie, what's your favourite track on the album?
I what is it? Let Me Go with Young Thug and Nicki. I thought that was, I love that for the interesting musical cocktail that it is. It starts off the record very strongly, and it's in one of my favorite keys, E flat major. And I love the way that Elton's vocals resonate on that. It is a very powerful, and he cut the vocal and the gospel chord change when he goes down on the scale. I'm hearing it in my head right now. It's very, you have to everybody listening to this has to check it out. It's a very, very well done track, and you just never expect artists like that to come together like that.
And Elton, can you just give me a sense how you feel about what Little Nas X represents? To be a young, gay, black man working in a genre of music which, let's face it, has had a fairly problematic relationship with the gay community over the years. What do you feel about him and what he represents?
He's a hurricane of fresh air, thank God. He's a seismic shift in how the hip hop community must regard gay people, and people in general regard gay people. He's got so much bravado and so much sense of humor and irony. He's so intelligent with what he's doing visually and lyrically and musically. And it's hard not to just take to him and watch him and you think, wow, where did this come from? Where did he come from? I think he worked for, I think he managed Nicki Minaj's social things. And then he just, he did Old Town Road, and then it just went from there. And, if you watch his videos and you see what a mind he is, he's going to do so many great things. I think he has a visual future as maybe a filmmaker or a script writer, because when I've met him and spent time with him, which I've done recently, he's just so full of ideas and so much humor. And he's just, I love the fact that when somebody criticized him, some governor criticized him, he said, haven't you got anything better to do than criticize me? He said, you've got people in your state who are suffering from COVID. Look after them. Don't worry about me. I'm doing fine. Thank you very much. So he, to me, is a much needed breath of fresh air. But there's a lot of, gay artists who are making great music. Arlo Parks, Troye Sivan, Perfume Genius, St. Vincent. And it's good. It just brings out the best in creativity from people who are gay, and he is a leading example of how to do it.
Charlie, what have you learnt most from Elton, having worked with him now?
What I've learned most from Elton is I'll say this musically. I don't overthink things as much, and that's not to say that you write songs very quickly and they just they're just whatever with them. But before I met Elton, I was I'd say in my career I was musically overthinking things, and I was so worried about what would be perceived as popular sonically, and worried about staying relevant. And he told me from that day that I met him in the restaurant that all I have to do is implement what I've learned, all my jazz and classical learnings, put them into my pop music, and the last thing I have to worry about is staying relevant. And right after when we got together and made this song, I think that was when I turned over a new leaf in my career. And after I put out my record next year, I'll continue on and maybe even make a jazz record one day. Just explore. There's lots of areas that I haven't explored yet musically, and he reminds me of that.
I gave him a real talking to the first time I met him, because I know how talented he is and what he's capable of, and he's only just scratched the surface. And he can write brilliant pop songs and make brilliant pop records. But there's an inner Stevie Wonder in this man here, and I've seen him play the piano, and he's got perfect pitch. He's capable of so many different things, and he's, as he just said, he will begin to stretch himself musically, and I will be there cracking the whip, saying, come on, you can do it, because he is phenomenally musically gifted, and I'm always impressed by people who are gifted like that.
Elton, you've recently, of course, had to say that you've had to postpone some dates, and when you build up, I've seen at very close hand how much you put into performing live and the energy that you bring to the audiences. How does it affect your mental health, having to kind of build up to shows, then having to, quite rightly for a hip operation, you have to look after yourself, but then how to build that back up again?
Well, I'm a recovering alcoholic, so everything that happens I have to accept, and I can't really change it. The only thing I can change is do something positive, get it done now. I hate disappointing people. I hate cancelling shows. But the point is, as Bono pointed out to me in the summer, he said, you need to get this done because you sing for a long time. I do 2 hours, 45 minutes, and I'm in pain. So I really want to enjoy what I'm doing. It's my last tour. I need to give 100% of myself because I love my fans, and I don't want to give less than 100%. So it was a painful decision that took quite a long time to reach. But in the end of the day, it was getting so bad, and I fell over just towards the end of the holiday, and that was the icing on the cake. And I just said, right. And David said, you've got to stop, and you've got to do this. We'll start in January. And it was the right decision. So it didn't cause me a lot of mental anguish. The only anguish I have is letting people down. But I would let them down if I started this tour and had to cancel it halfway through because I was ill or my hip was hurting too much. So this is the best solution. And there's always a good solution as the line from out of chaos comes order from Blazing Saddles.
Quoting Blazing Saddles, brilliant.
Nietzsche says, and it's like, oh boy.